I won't sugarcoat it. Tonight will be a little bit of a tougher conversation. To break it down with us, criminal defense attorney Skye Lazaro is here, and she'll join us momentarily. We're discussing the sentencing of Shane Peterson, the now convicted killer of his own son, Gavin Peterson. The 12-year-old endured years of abuse and countless interactions with the Utah Division of Child and Family Services, or DCFS, before dying in the hospital from severe injuries and starvation complications in 2024. Let's listen to part of court today.
It is without question that Gavin experienced physical pain prior to his ultimate death. His body was riddled with evidence that he was beaten more than once. The lack of body fat and diminishing muscle likely made the pain worse.
And it goes on from there. That was Judge Camille Nider emotionally retelling the medical examination of Gavin Peterson. She went on to say she found it telling that she herself was more emotional in court today than Shane Peterson was. And she also mentioned it was the first time that she could recall in her 25 years on the bench that she cried in open court. Called it unacceptable that Shane allowed, encouraged, condoned, and even facilitated the abuse against Gavin Peterson more than one time, and Shane was found guilty on all 5 charges against him. Judge Nider says she will encourage the board to keep him locked up until he dies. Hard to mince words there when Judge Nider was extremely forthcoming with her thoughts today. Criminal defense attorney Skye Lazaro, kind enough to join us in studio tonight to discuss this at length. I mean, the judge, extremely emotional. How telling is that?
I think that's extremely telling. I mean, we have to remember judges are supposed to be impartial and are impartial, but they're human beings as well, and they're people and they have experiences, as we heard Judge Nider discuss in open court today. When you have a judge that gets this emotional during a sentencing, I think that tells us is that the facts of this case are particularly bad. This is a judge with a criminal calendar, and she sees a lot of cases every day, every week, and has for years.
How often is it that you witness a judge with that sort of emotion in court? Not
often. I mean, I've seen judges get a little angry, maybe yell at some people, get stern, but to see a judge experience that level of emotion, I think, is extremely telling in this case.
All family members in this case pled guilty, so that would be the stepmother, the father, the brother, Tyler. Now, Tyler pled guilty with a mental condition to child abuse resulting in homicide. So can you explain a difference between what that looks like compared to perhaps the other 2 adults?
Right, so when someone pleads guilty by reason of mental defect or disease, what that does is it allows for treatment options. So the case is now set for an update on any treatment or any assessments that can be done so that they can get a better understanding of perhaps his diagnosis and his mental capabilities. What that allows a judge to do is be able to sentence them proportionately. It means they can spend time at a state hospital, they could spend time in a facility, maybe they don't go to prison on this case.
Now, Shane submitted certificates of completion from jail, things like completing courses, culinary skills, tasks. The judge was actually upset that Shane believed this would help him. I mean, it seems like more of a Hail Mary attempt for lessening one of those charges or the recommendations?
Anytime you have somebody who's looking at a potential prison sentence or a lengthy jail sentence and they're incarcerated, most attorneys will encourage their clients to participate in any sort of programming or resources that are available throughout the jail. That does not always translate to mitigation. Now, in some cases, it certainly can, where they've done a bunch of stuff, but it's not a really egregious case. Judges will say, hey, look, you've taken this seriously. You did a lot of work on yourself while you were incarcerated. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt and either give you less time or perhaps, sentence you to probation. In a case like this, it wasn't going to make any difference for him.
Judge basically saying there's nothing you can do at this point. And she also encouraged the board, which here in Utah, it's that board that'll ultimately determine the length of the sentence. We've talked about this with Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrand, another child abuse case that did not result in death, but resulted in harm to the children. Until you die is what she said with her recommendation. hoping that the board listens, now out of her control.
It is out of her control, and it is ultimately up to the board. He was sentenced consecutively on the first-degree felony, 3 second-degree felonies, and a third, which means 40% of those sentences are going to tack on. But when you have a judge who's recommending or makes a recommendation to the board that this person should not be allowed to be paroled because there is no way that they can foresee them safely being in the community or, paying the penance portion of their crime, I do think the board will take that into consideration.
On the board subject, because people always ask, you see it in the comments, well, how long was he sentenced for? It's quite confusing until you learn it, and I'm still learning it. You've probably already learned how this thing operates. Is the board the most effective way in this situation? Is it the most effective way to make sure, in a way, it's a subjective decision, but it's gotten right, it's correct at the end of the day?
The theory behind having the board make these decisions is it gets rid of any disparity among judges. So you may have a judge who would sentence one crime super harsh and a judge in another county who would sentence it differently. By giving it to the board, what you're saying is, look, you guys, run the matrix, you have the sentencing guidelines, and then they get to decide on a case-by-case basis, based on the facts of that case, what people do along the way, exactly how much time they're going to do. And I think that is the right way because it allows the board to take into consideration the facts of the case. And also, if he goes to prison and gets in trouble, they're going to keep him longer.
You and I watched the judge's remarks while reading some of the medical examination of Gavin and the emotion behind it. But is there anything else that jumped out at you from this case or what you saw today, as we all saw, with a very emotional day in the courtroom that doesn't always happen?
It doesn't, and this is a very sad case, and the judge probably only got a fraction of the facts that are out there. Because he pled guilty, this case didn't go to trial, so we probably didn't hear about the entire extent of the injuries, but she did focus on not just the injuries that resulted in his death, but the psychological effect that it had on him while he was going through this. And she really emphasized that this kid knew what was happening to him was wrong. And, he had to live and endure that. The other thing, in this case, and we saw after Ruby Frankie, is, this case had been referred to DCFS back in 2020, and nothing was done. And, not to pass blame from the defendant to, a state agency, certainly not doing that. What he did is what he did and continued to do. But the lack of intervention in these cases, I think, is somewhat troubling.
And we've had this unfortunate conversation talking about what you would categorize as a higher profile child abuse case. This one extremely unfortunate with a death involved. And you just alluded to DCFS. At this point, when you look at a case like this, maybe you look at Frankie Hildebrandt and some of the others that we've talked about, do these cases highlight significant lapses in the system, not protecting these children?
I would say yes. And the reason is that these cases have ongoing patterns of abuse. This isn't just nobody saw it coming or a parent had a psychological break and acted completely out of character. These are cases where they'd been referred to DCFS because someone at the school was concerned about, maybe his condition or the way he looked. And then if you have medical records or things like that, and it sounds like in this case he didn't, but the extent of his injuries, it probably would have been noticeable to adults. So had DCFS gotten involved, they perhaps could have stopped what inevitably happened in this case.
Well, the case from the very beginning has been troubling, and as we learned more facts about it and things that were written by officers and reports, absolutely disturbing. Don't want to sugarcoat it. Thanks for coming in and talking about this. I know it's not an easy topic to talk
It's not.
about.
Thank you, Brian.
Criminal defense attorney Skye Lazaro joining us here on the program tonight. Now, last October, we did an entire half-hour town hall meeting on this case and the push for change within DCFS. If you'd like to watch this discussion with community members from West Haven, just rocked by this case, we posted that online. It's on our YouTube page right now. You can find it there. It's our KUTV 2 News page.